Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending this webinar from the world of art to the world of agriculture in such large number because you're very numerous tonight. This webinar is part of a research creation program, which is called The Table and Territory, which is called co-facilitated by COAL, an NGO about art and environment, French NGO, the LADIS, a laboratory of research, and the Center for Earth Politics, a center dedicated to promoting interdisciplinary research and research creation on the environment. The Table and Territory is a transdisciplinary European cooperation project funded by Created Europe to develop and link a community of cultural actors that act for ecology and sustainable food across Europe. The project is implemented by 6 leading European players in the field of art, ecology, and territories, and we will listen to some of them tonight. I will present Zone Sensible in France, Campo Adentro in Spain, Art Mill in Czech Republic, Locus Athens in Greece, and the PAV, Parco Arte Vivente in Italy. This seminar is the first in a series of 5 that will allow us to explore the role of art and artists in the world of agriculture. We will look more broadly at what art does to agriculture and what agriculture does to art. Why do we link art and agriculture? This is the question we may ask. Food and the way we grow and use land today in this time of ecological emergency is at the heart of environmental health, climate change, and biodiversity issues. We believe with COAL that artists have a central role to play in highlighting another way of producing food and land. This exploratory work will result in a book, which is due in 2022 at Routledge, that will expose in more detail the importance of these experiments in research and creation. Now, let me introduce the main speakers that we have tonight. I have the pleasure to receive tonight Barbara Benish. Barbara Benish is an artist, a curator, a writer, a farmer also. She's the founder and director of Art Mill at Oradovice in Czech Republic, a rural farm which is an extension of a social art practice. She has been an advisor to the United Nations Environmental Programme, member of the Social Practice Art Research Center in Santa Cruz University, and a Fulbright Scholar. She co-authored Form, Art and the Environment with myself at Routledge, which was published in 2017, and is currently working on 3 new books, not less. Art, Food and Farming with myself, and another book about art dialogue, 1989, which is a reminder of the past time, and the illustration for the aesthetics of precarity with Mike Shapiro. A 15-year retrospective of Benish's work on water issues will be shown at the Doyle Gallery in California, spring of 2021, if it's possible. The second speaker, I don't know if he has joined yet. No. Fernando Garcia Dori is an artist and agroecologist, founder of Campo Adentro Inland and the Inland Village in Asturias, Spain, a para-institution platform of collaboration working on art, territories, and social change in theory practice. His work engages the relationship between culture and nature now, as manifested in multiple contexts, from landscape and the rural to desires and expectation concerned with identity through the global crisis, utopia, and the potential for social change. His work also addresses connection and cooperation from microorganism to social system and from traditional art languages such as drawing to collaborative agroecological projects, actions, and cooperatives. At last but not the least, Giulia Mengozzi works at PAV, Parco Arte Vivente in Torino, Italy. Since 2014, she's the assistant of the curator, Marco Scottini, and project coordinator for Theatrum Botanicum Emerging Talents Festival and Pondo. She graduated in visual arts and curatorial studies. This is the art word for French. Studies at NABA, Nuova Accademia dell'Arte Milano, with a master's thesis about the collective vocality. The question should be asked at the end through the QR question you have at the bottom level of your screen. You can ask questions all during the talks, and we'll pick them up later at the end of all talks in order to answer to all your questions. And this webinar will be recorded, so you will be able to see it online if you miss part of it, or if you want to re-look at it. So the red thread of this discussion will be about the relation between your place, the place of each of the speakers, and on one side, the world of art, and on the other side, the world of agriculture. We'll have a first round of a question, and I will ask Barbara to answer to my first two questions. Can you describe your projects, its history, background, and can you tell us about your practice in your place at the art mill and the materiality of the places you have created? Please, Barbara, let me hear you.
Thank you, Natalie, and welcome to everyone. It's a delight to be here. I'm going to start with some images and tell a little bit background, just very briefly, about Art Mill and Art Dialogue, what we do. So I will try and share the screen now and talk as I go. So bear with me while I get this up. We are, as Natalie mentioned, we are based out in the countryside of Western Bohemia in Czech Republic. We started about 20 years ago. It's an old mill, is our home site. We have many programs running for education for students as well as artists who come. We have residency program. We do workshops, we have the study abroad, and then we work also closely with our local community. It's a rural community, it's a farming community. As you can see, we're right on a lake, so there are fisher people also. And we've, from the beginning, tried to work as closely as possible with our neighbors and our local community, as well as the international students and artists that have. So we work kind of non-hierarchical in a way, both with the level of artistic practice, as well as gender issues, as well as age issues, as well as international cross-cultural. So we try and break some of these traditional barriers down. Because we are rural, we are able to bring people here into an environment that's very different than the urban environment. Our roots come out of the city of Prague, actually. We started in 1989 with an exchange exhibition of American and Czech artists. That was the first time, it was right before the Berlin Wall came down, that this kind of exchange had happened. So we come out of a very politicized and political background that's working with social justice and social change. So to be working in environmental justice and change is quite natural for us to create the kind of global planetary changes we need to do with climate. So as you can see, it's very rural. It's a small working farm. We've had horses in the past. We have chickens, goat, your basic animals for food, as well as raising our own food. And this is what we try to do as far as some kind of experiential learning with the young people who come here, that it is a place where they can grow their own food and learn how to do it from the ground up, so to speak. So for a project for Table of Territory, we had begun with the idea that we would look at supermarket food. The changes that happened here in '89 are kind of opposite of many other places in the Western developed world, in that supermarkets became a luxury here because of the scarcity of food before and the way it was produced in the rural atmosphere in former Czechoslovakia. When the supermarkets came to the local regions, it became a prestige symbol. So we wanted to work with our local people in how to bring back the advantages and the joy of growing one's own food, and also the economic comparisons. So as far as labor is concerned. So the project, of course, changed during COVID because we had to go into quarantine in the spring when we started. So the ideas shifted around. There were 10 young people at Art Mill from all over, and they were all working on how to create not only a garden for growing food, but how to deal with that transportation systems of food, packaging of food, the environmental impact on the trucking, which a lot of trucking comes through Czech Republic. We're a major thoroughfare for transportation. So they were looking at these issues. We had, and the one concrete thing that happened that we will be continuing with that's really exciting is a new seed bank. So all the young people from around were bringing seeds from their grandmothers and putting them into the bank. So for next year, this will be something that we'll be continuing. A beautiful booklet, a kind of a how-to booklet came out of this, how to grow your own garden on a very small plot. And here's just a kind of quick little sketch to give you an idea of all the kind of interactive things that were happening with this project. So with the art farm, the research module, we talked about different performances and different artworks that would come out of this. And I'm going to show you a couple of those now, so I'm not taking too much time. But basically, we're a very John Deweyan kind of experiential place. So anybody who comes here is working directly in the earth too. And it's not just about formal learning, but it's definitely an informal education and artistic experience here. This is one of the images from the exhibition we had last month and the festival at the Art Barn here. This is Denise Davis's work. She's Native American and half Welsh. And her work we thought was very symbolic of what we were talking about for the whole project, and we will be continuing. She'll be doing workshops with us next summer. This is an acorn basket, gathering basket that she had exhibited in the exhibition. And then of course, we actually used it to separate the acorns. So she's been teaching us how to gather and store acorns for food later on. So we're learning new practices ourselves too about food that is taken from the local environment. We took the theme of the table in the territory quite literally. As you can see, we put the table in the territory, and we'd been dreaming about this for a long time for our farm to table. It turned out a little differently than we thought under quarantine. So I think this is an even better symbol of the empty table up on the hillside. But the performance artist, Martin Zett, came. He joined us at the festival and did a beautiful, beautiful piece that I think really connects all the things that we've been talking about this connection to the earth, the materiality of our bodies. So he took a traditional Czech meat grinder and set it up on the table and had this very uncomfortable material that went into the meat grinder that came out in another way and set them all up on the table during the performance. So it was a reminder of how we are returning to the earth in a very visceral way. And then I'll just finish up with this briefly. This was a presentation by two of our local neighbors who are both artists based in Prague and the countryside, Tomáš and Andrea Hruza. And they have started a project that will be going on all year with our local villagers. They've gone to collect all the local recipes that are traditional here in the Czech countryside. They're putting them into a recipe book, but they're also reconverting a local bus stop into a new little farmers market that all the local farmers can come and put their produce there and have like a little sharing space instead of having to go to the supermarket, because we're very isolated. We're quite outside the city. So it's kind of a return to how things used to be, but they're instigating it as this young couple who have moved out to the country and re-inspiring the local population, hopefully. So I think my time is about up, but I'm happy to answer questions later and keep going. So I will hand it to you.
Okay, I'm sorry, I forgot my mic. So thank you, Barbara. It was very nice, very interesting. And now I'm going to ask the same question to Fernando. So in order to know better your project, can you describe your project, its history, its background? Can you tell us about your practices and the materiality of the place you have created? Because we're very interested in materiality for this webinar. So please don't forget your mic like I did. We can't hear you, Fernando. Doesn't seem to be working. Well, okay, I'll let the floor to Julia, then we'll come back to you afterwards once we have solved this problem. So Julia?
Hello, can you hear me or?
Perfectly, that's perfect, thank you.
Oh, wow, okay. So let me share my screen. Okay, hope you can see it. And let's start to talk. I would like to start this hopefully brief intervent, contextualizing in somehow, with a contextualization somehow above situation, because we are talking about art and agriculture, and in a way it concerns the rural landscape, the rural ecosystem in a way, no? So as part, we are in a different ecology because we are an urban space, even if most of our space is constituted by a park of 22,000 square meters, but we are not in the countryside. So speaking about art and agriculture, art and ecology, I felt the need to underline something that could be problematic in the urban context. I will let you see, okay, pictures as I speak. So sometimes bringing art, and in particular art institutions, outside of the conventional coordinates of, you know, city centers or posh districts that are the result of top-down processes, you know, to create so-called creative, whatever it means, district. Well, this kind of operation could be a risky business in terms of general sustainability and living condition. Art projects, even the more well-intentioned ones, are not neutral actors, being us all deeply connected to specific power structures and interests. In many urban plans and policy-making artistic intervention, in the context of urban regeneration, because as I will explain you, is what we are talking about. Yeah, I was saying, in the context of urban regeneration is too often perceived by the government, but also many other actors, as instrumental to profit, to raise the value of the neighborhood income without having a real awareness of the territory and its citizens. But I will say that after almost 15 years, I think that PAV, Parco Arte Vivente staff members that are involved in the projects since its beginning, and as I can only testify, even if I work there only since 2014. Well, I was saying, we as a staff, we can be enthusiastic to be part of an initiative, an operation with an honest background of social, territorial, and environmental enhancement. Because PAV represented and represents a great investment, I think, in artistic, cultural, and environmental education and training in the urban context, an investment in community building instead of a more or less conscious gentrification machine. But let's start from the beginning. Why I choose to focus the starting point of this speech talking about gentrification? Because the project of PAV, Parco Arte Vivente, which means literally Park of the Living Art, started back in the mid-2000s and was conceived by a group of people based in Turin, strongly persuaded about the potential of relationship between nature and the specific meaning of cultural expression that we call art. And of course, mentioning nature and culture with two different words, I think we all can agree upon the fact that it's a trivial simplification on the inextricable entanglement of things. In this sense, we often refer to the famous notion of nature culture by Donna Haraway. But please forgive me this kind of schematic definition and let me move on. This group of motivated people was led by artist Piero Gilardi. I will let you see a few pictures of PAV while I speak, and some events and stuff that we do that I explain better later. And this is Piero, caught in a video recently exhibited in an exhibition at Museum Maxi in Rome. So starting back in the 60s, the artistic path of Piero Gilardi fits into the line traced by the encounter between art and nature, from the famous nature carpets, which I'm showing you always from the same exhibition at Maxi. Here is exhibition at Michel Reyne Gallery in Paris, which I think is still open. Anyway, so from these very famous nature carpets, Tappeti Natura in Italian, to his most recent projects, in which the sculptural dimension and the technological and interactive one function as activators of relationships between the viewer and the environment. It's difficult to speak about Piero Gilardi's career within a 15 minutes speech. So we just show you from images from, the Tappeti Natura to his political activism in the 70s. We see a picture from a rally here. So since the 70s, he realizes political animations and props for endless protests and rallies for the workers' movement, environmentalist movement, and to anti-psychiatry. But we could also think about an extremely recent work like Apiaria 2016. You see a blurry picture here. An installation exhibited in PAV Park, through which was possible to observe the life of bees closely, involving all senses. So in a way, Gilardi always stressed the importance of stimulating critical thinking through research and education as pillars of participatory practices. The idea of, and here we came to PAV, so forgive me for this long introduction about Piero's career, but I think that this is really fundamental because in a way, PAV is another Piero Gilardi's work, another participatory Piero Gilardi work, because of course it's not like a solipsistic operation that he did. He worked together with a group. Now we are a staff, but in a way, Piero's footprint, is really important in this sense. So I really wanted to show you a bit of his work. So in a way, I was saying that the idea of creating an alternative contemporary art institution took a concrete step forward in 2006 when Piero Gilardi and the others encountered the favors of the city on Turin to start building the pub. Behind the pub, said Gilardi, there is all my work in thousands of collective situations. Here we see Piero leading a workshop at pub. So why I was speaking about gentrification in the beginning of my speech? Because pub has been built in a former, then abandoned industrial urban area. Where we are now, we are like, I don't know if any one of you is familiar with Turin, but we are somehow in the Mirafiori district that used to be practically completely occupied by activities and factories related to the Fiat headquarters. No, so when the idea of PAV came to a concrete point of construction, of the proper center, in the area where we are now, there was a former industrial factory abandoned since, I guess, 10, 15 years. So you can imagine that how risky can be for a contemporary art institution to occupy, a former abandoned places in relation to all the possible gentrification processes that can somehow incur, no? In a way, it's something that didn't happen with PAV because of the constant working. And I think that this is really important also in ecological terms. And I think that this is something that we all should consider. Also in terms of constant collaboration with institutions and the local community in order not to create some kind of posh space to just enhance the market value of the zone, but really to create a place based on community building. As I was saying, the center currently consists of a park of 22,000 square meters that hosts 19 artistic environmental interventions. As you saw in the first picture, the building is literally under a hill beside this permanent open air collection and temporary exhibitions. PAV offers a rich program of activities and workshops aimed to the general audience. Body art program and the educational activities led by Orietta Brambin. And of course, these two aspects interact continuously and are basically conceptually co-designed. Anyway, but the exhibition and the workshops touch different fields of investigation, ranging from creative biology, hybridization, and the ethical aesthetic research between man and nature. The collaboration with the actual PAV's curator, Marco Scottini, as Nathalie said, I'm his assistant, started back in 2014 with the exhibition Vegetation as a Political Agent. So here we have like a picture of the exhibition with the work by Emory Douglas. So the exhibition, and I will spend a few minutes talking about it because I think it's really important. I wanted to write a history of the plant world, exploring the political and social implications of vegetation. The exhibition started from the idea that plants are not as neutral and unrelated to power dynamics as most of people might think. For example, they played a particularly important role in the 17th and 18th century when navigators and so-called explorers sent to discover the world by empires like the British one, basically were part of the much wider colonization process. And then think about operation aimed at exploiting the financial potential of new from a Western point of view, of course, plant species, culminating in the spice trade. All of that was a fundamental part of those colonization processes. At the other end of the spectrum, the exhibition told us about communities which from the 70s on have been building alliances with plants in the realm of political resistance to oppression. So I'm showing you other exhibitions pictures, and I will stop on one that is maybe particularly connected to, field of agriculture. Yeah. Because this idea of political agency of nature and human beings that don't conceive themselves as something alien from the natural world somehow recurs in every new exhibition, showing new perspectives of this line of research every time. We can mention, since it touches the issues at the core of the Same Table and Territory program, the 2015 exhibition Grow It Yourself, and Fernando was part of it as well as vegetation as a political agent. And but yeah, but I think we'll speak later about that exhibition, going a little bit more deep into it if it's possible. But I just want to say that this is just one case study of the many ways in which we explored the theme of the relationship between art practices and agricultural practices. We did it also, for example, and I think that this is kind of important, in a genealogical perspective, organizing many exhibitions that took the theme from an historical point of view, dedicating a trilogy of exhibitions about the pioneers of environmental art and activism, like the exhibition Earthrise or Ecologies, or this exhibition I'm showing you now, related to the activity of Joseph Beuys in connection with ecology and political practices. So in a way, I just wanted to say that one of the paths that PAV chooses to follow in this sense is also to take the issues that we are discussing tonight from a genealogical point of view, exploring them since the 70s. So I think that, yeah, for the moment I can leave.
Yeah, we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That was very enlightening. And I think now we can try again with Fernando, if it works, perhaps without your headphones, it might work. So these two questions about your place and your project.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Sorry, I didn't want to jump on Julia's ending, but it was very interesting. Thank you, Julia, for sharing. And
you have images to show us.
Overreact to the invitation, but knowing that you can hear me, I will take this short time to share with you a little bit about Inland Project and what we have been doing recently in relation to Table and Territory Project. So if you allow me, I'm going to share with you for a moment the screen. And
and please, for the audience, I mean, if you have questions, just use the Q&R button at the bottom level right, and we'll answer them at the end of our exchange, of our discussion.
Okay, so well, can you see it? Yeah. So Inland is a little bit of a practice in itself, a space of questioning how we could transition to more environmental sustainable systems of production, of circulation, of consumption, and that applies as well to art. So I would say it's a platform for collaboration that puts in relation art workers or art producers, cultural producers with land producers. And it was a little bit of something we sent to an exhibition. Hans Ulrich Hobrich was asking us to contribute, and it was 1 year ago. It was incredible because at that time it was like hypermobility, diversion of attention, fast moves, and now it's a moment to maybe rethink how we could also slow down and take it in another way. Also how we produce within art. So Inland has been growing since 2010 as this form of para-institution, or a state within the state, if you like, with different strands, like the production of knowledge, with publication and training, also with systems like this, Shepherd School, or the production of art projects, as well as in the spaces we are based. One in Madrid, well, actually we have two spaces in Madrid in the city, one in the mountains, and then also in Mallorca, and working in different contexts. So the idea is that we create an art craft, sorry, I think you don't, art craft farm produce, and then that's commercialized to rethink as well economy and how we could sustain in the future in a durational way, this practice based in the land. In the beginning, we started by working in 22 villages around the country and taking the rural in Spain as case study, engaging with the situation of different places, from northern mountains to the southern horticultural big productions in the south of Spain, and then also publishing books or making cheese, running the study groups, as well as a world movement of pastoralist peoples. It took this idea as well of let's say it's between a startup, a social movement, and a cult. And we started by creating this image for the whole project, with also gatherings. And in each place, the project was a bit different. In these early years, from 2010 to 2013, we're working in the villages. And for example, involving artists in the redesign. In this case, Channel Tai, a Turkish artist, was working with the village of Carrícola in Valencia to rethink the way in which the weekly market could happen in the village. So this was exhibited in Madrid during Narco, and then this was a way also to highlight the importance of the village itself. Then later with a discussion in the museum with museum directors and so on. So it's like investing culturally to highlight the importance of food production in a sustainable way in the countryside. We were running also the Shepherd School from 2004. And this Shepherd School is now also extended to Madrid city, well, to Madrid, to the mountains of Madrid. This was the announcement for 2020 course of the Shepherd School. And we had 100 students, 100 applicants. So we can see that there's like a growing interest on this form of life and culture. This is a moment of the class, learning how to drive the shepherd dog. And then we have this flock in the city of Madrid. Actually, I came running now from there, from the big park of Madrid. We brought the sheep. And thanks to, let me see how we can see it. Thanks also to the possibility of this project, Table and Territory, we were running this workshop that was about building a structure for the sheep that has also different uses. It's not only a place where we keep the sheep, but also is where we milk them and we produce dairy products that circulate around the city. We are working with the students from Konstfack University, Architecture and Design, in order to rethink the whole structure that is hosting the sheep, and how this could be also inspired in termite nest architecture. And we are also now producing a wallpaper to decorate your house, inspired in the structure and the fact of having sheep in the park of Madrid. Other images of the study group and the space we have in Madrid as well, where we are running as well exhibitions and also tastings of products and so on. And I think it would be maybe interesting to mention the village as a place as well of work for inland. And in this place, we try to reconnect the different interests of cultural production. For example, bringing architects, landscape engineers, or artists from different universities all around Europe, and they look at the different contexts around the village. And we also work with our flock. This is our member in the right, Nell, with the sheep. And we produce cheese there, which is actually like a central aspect of the whole collective, because we are developing this idea of a cheese coin, a currency based in the production of cheese. So this is more the new curriculum project. I was planning to tell you a little bit more also about the recent projects we engaged in the process of this year activities in the frame of Table and Territory. These are the activities now, because the space I was mentioning in the city of Madrid is becoming an important also epicenter for testing training methodologies to make the people in the city to get closer to the land. And it's because it's outdoors, it's working very well. So it's a good opportunity for people to also learn about the transhumance, that is the movement of the flocks from the north of Spain to the south annually. We do that with our ship. And then this thing you see here will also be a place to transform the milk from the flock into cheese and other products. This project itself now has the new curriculum aspect in the village, and this year we work with 3 artists: Georgina Hill, who will be talking in the frame of these webinars, and I won't tell much about her project, but we are working on the fish politics and sea politics of this region, no? The sea in between the north of England, the west coast of France, and the north of Spain, and how this is like a fishing policy, and the fishing question is being used as an argument for Brexit, while actually it's a question of conflict between the models of fishing. Like some fishing models are like industrial and extractive, how it's affected by the environmental question. And then we were focusing on the eels, these nice little things that are like very, very expensive food in Spain. But you will hear more about this with Georgina. The other artist we work with is Stefan Laxness, and Stefan Laxness is from Forensic Architecture-based collective in London. We are looking at the different uses of the land in terms of environmental restoration, and he's flying this helium balloon with a camera as a way to understand vegetational changes in the land, in places in Spain with very little population. So how that gives a sort of chromatography that allows you to understand the changes in vegetation and as you can see, the different layers. So it's a form of mapping that is partly like a very aerial view, but it also involves like walking on the ground, because you have to be like driving the balloon. And this has taken us to work with this potential collaboration with a village that is removing all the eucalyptus from the land. The titles are in Spanish, but it's involving like the reforestation of eucalyptus monoculture into edible forest. So how we could combine native forests and other species like cherry tree, chestnut, oak tree, together with other crops and with the sheep for this new understanding of a commons. It's a commons cultivated forest or mountain. So I think I would leave it here to avoid to be talking for long, and maybe later we can have some conversation amongst us, or if you have any questions.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting. As that was the first images I saw a few places that I'm going to visit as soon as the lockdown is finished. So I hope soon. So now I will start to ask a question to all 3 of you. It is about your relationship to both the world of art and the world of agriculture. How do you get along? I mean, how is your work recognized in the world of art? What kind of a place it is? Because I have written a certain history about this relationship between food and art, but it seems to me that art before was mostly designed to represent the food. I mean, like vanities and such paintings. And nowadays, what you are doing in all 3 territories is more like producing the territory itself. It's not just representing the food or representing the act of eating. It's more like producing the territory. So how this kind of art as something is recognized in the world of art, and how do you cope with your neighbors, which are real peasants or agricultures? So, I mean, please be free to take the floor. One of you. Barbara?
Yeah, I'll try and address that. I could share a recent, it's a really good and difficult question too, I think. Recently, I have revisited Sor Juana de la Cruz. I'm sure you all know her writing and poetry, especially Fernando. And she has this wonder, she was the Mexican poet, Baroque. And she had a wonderful phrase. She said, because as it was so difficult for women at that time period to be engaged in the intellectual life, and her most often quote is, a woman can just as well philosophize at the kitchen table as anywhere else. But she goes on in the rest of the treatise, and she talks about the slowness of cooking and sharing with the community, and how that transforms one into a different space. And I think that's what a lot of us are doing here, is that when we're making food, not just producing it and changing the territory, as you say, but when we're sharing with our neighbors and making the food or the cheese, whatever it is, then we transfer a different time set. And I think that's what a lot of us who are working in the rural atmosphere do, as compared to the very hectic life we all live. That's one answer anyway.
Do you have any other answers, Julia or Fernando? I mean, the PAV has been working in this, trying to link food and the territory since a long time now, and inviting the world of art in it. So how does it work?
Yeah, Barbara was made me think a lot, so I was like on the point of answering, but I don't know. Was waiting for Fernando to move or something, but I'm taking word. Yeah, I think that we can start from this issue that Barbara mentioned, this idea of time, of the completely different time set of the rural areas versus, if we can use this expression, the hectic, as you said, time frame of the city centers. I mean, Turin is not even such a huge city. I mean, it's not a metropolis, but it is definitely not a rural area. And in a way, as I said at the beginning, we as PAV are a little bit on the verge, between this kind of, I wouldn't say rural space, because we are in a suburban area, but like rural attitude somehow towards time, for example, as Barbara mentioned, and the urban space and the urban attitude per se. So it's like we are constantly on the verge between those two aspects, as we are between the idea of technology and nature at the same time. It's like in Piero Gilardi's work, everything is connected somehow, and completely denies any kind of dichotomic attitude towards, for example, in the case of Gilardi's work, but also as technology and an environmentalist attitude. So it's like, and in a way, I think that also the idea apparently, which I personally think is part of the problem, okay, that we can see in speaking about the difference between the countryside and the city space, this dichotomic perception, which of course we are socialized to understand and to perceive. So it's normal. I'm not like accusing no one, and of course I'm not accusing myself as well. But we have this kind of really dichotomic posture and attitude towards the agricultural world and the city world and the rural world, and the different time frames in which we put ourselves when we when we operate, okay, in those completely different scenarios. And I think that this kind of art practices, of course, I'm thinking both about Art Mill and Inland Campo Dentro, which I know a little bit better because we had the pleasure to exhibit Fernando's operation, we can say, organization in the frame of the exhibition I was mentioning before. I think, well, that those kind of art practices can be the vanguard of a new way, which is of course a privilege of art, you know, to be the vanguard of something anytime. We can somehow be the vanguard, the avant-garde, a laboratory of different modalities of living, which are, you know, on the verge between the urban space and rural space. Because I personally really think that one point is not accepting the dichotomy that I already mentioned, because otherwise the urban space is lost in terms of environmental and ecological discourses. And it's not actually, because, for example, as PAV, I mean, I will, as Nathalie said, PAV is working for since, you know, forever on this kind of issues. So I will like, will be able to do 100 examples. So I'm trying to stay on an abstract level. But for example, in our park, we have at least hosted or organized at least, I think, 5 projects that are at the same time artistic interventions and urban gardens in which people really cultivate vegetables. I mean, as basic as it is from a certain point. But this is also a tool of community building, especially for, I don't know, I'm thinking about elder people, for example. It's so important to have a point of reference in this sense. And if I'm not stealing too much time, as well, it's just like the last 2 minutes, I'm always coming back to that kind of genealogical and historical perspective. I'm thinking about the research of an Italian artist that was super active in the 70s. Probably you heard about him. His name is Ugo La Pietra, as a fundamental figure, but in contemporary art and design and architecture. And he did this amazing research that we exhibited a few years ago about suburban gardens. Okay, what nowadays we will call urban gardens, but at the time we were talking about suburbans, like occupied / free zones, actually pretty illegal and abusive in a way, that migrants from the south of Italy who came from a rural scenario with all the values and habits, and also, I don't know, vernacular forms of construction, everything. Well, they brought those kind of expertise also in the suburban context of cities like Milan. And we had this amazing research of Ugo La Pietra that showed us examples and case studies of those kind of gardens. And nowadays people is doing the same also, with the help of art organization and initiatives like the one we're speaking about tonight. So I think that, yeah, in a way, overcoming the dichotomy in this sense is something that we as PAV are doing. I don't know.
Thank you. And Fernando, do you have something to say about your craft? The territory craft.
Yeah, well, I think if I understood well, the question was phrased as around the relation between art and food production or food. I would think that we would need to define art in the sense that art has been changing definition through history. And if we look at the ancient notion of art, for example, in classical Greece or Rome, the idea of techne in Greece was related with certain operations, like involved, for example, agriculture. So the idea of sculpturing a piece of a stone or making a marble to look like a horse, it was a minor art. Also the poetry, the main arts were related with navigation, were related with agriculture, and operations that related with the everyday life and the need to reconnect the material operations and imagination with a productive activity. Now there has been through history like a progressive separation between art and life, we can say, and it has become like a space for, let's say, the free inspiration of the artist to create objects for delightful contemplation. And I think we cannot afford that at this moment anymore. And if we look at the moment, for example, in 1848, in the time of the Paris Commune, and now it later, it was like almost a divergent, maybe evolution of the art system from arts and crafts, and then on the other hand, the most, let's say, l'art pour l'art, no notion of art just for its our own sake. Well, I think we are living a crucial moment in which we need to rethink and remake the whole paradigm that sustains human societies and activities, and therefore food allows us as cultural producers to kind of connect with a very visceral aspect, that is somehow recovering our materiality, our animality, if you like. We are closer to the metabolism, not only of our bodies, but also of the earth, with the progression of growth and decay and the seasons. So we are in need of reconnection with that. I was teaching yesterday in an MA in Bolzano in Italy. A student in the Master of Eco-Social Design was researching on the impact of social networks in youth. And since the social networks started to be more operative for the millennial generation, there has been a rise in self-harm and suicide that is similar to those generations who were like going through a war or a huge trauma. So this is showing us like we are very much in a direction of disconnecting from a biospheric level in the moment where we need to be more connected, actually, because we are putting all those life systems in risk. So I think that through food is a way to grab a little bit the fellow citizen, anyone around, about how we deal with natural resources, how we could satisfy that primary need of eating, but also the elevated need of being with others, being part of something, having a meaning, and having a good life. And for example, an urban garden, it's satisfying these two set of needs, as Max Neef was writing. There are like different satisfactors that somehow have a synergetic effect. So I think in the West, we might not have a visible or urgent problem regarding food security, as in most of the global South and other regions, although it's a growing thing. But I think it's about which model of food production we want to see expanding, and how that could be a cultural expression. How could artists and cultural creation as well be, yes, like a mutual influence in that process of rethinking the model.
Yeah, thank you. This was a wonderful response. I mean, I felt it very, very, very true. And I feel also that more than food, I mean, you're also producing the territory. I mean, it's a mode of relationship, I would say, to earth, land, and whatever use we have of it. So I feel like it's time.
You have to say,
Yeah,
the French have a very beautiful notion of terroir. I think it's
yeah, that's it.
Terroir is goes from the, let's say, from the grape that will make the wine to the bacteria in the soil, to the soil itself, the geology. So
and the people.
And the people as well,
I mean,
and the culture.
The terroir is mostly made of people doing whatever they do with land, trying to produce land, and land producing the people. I mean, it's a reciprocal link. It is a very difficult thing to understand while you're in the city, for example. But I feel that it's time now that we look back at cities as places of terroir, as you said, not only the rural areas, but we can create this terroir in cities with distinctive atmosphere, distinctive food, distinctive people, and way of tasting life, I would say. So it's something around that. But I feel it's time to leave the floor to Jessica and questions that we might have from the Q&R.
Yeah. Hi, can you hear me well? Yes.
Okay.
Great. Okay, so we received a few questions on the Q&A, so I'm going to read some out loud. So the first one goes to Barbara and your project ArtMail. So Barbara, could you tell me a bit more about the effect of your art on your neighbors? And have you noticed any change due to artistic practices, and what would they be? Hi, Barbara, can you hear me?
Well, it seems that she has
Frozen.
vanished somehow.
Oh,
Well, we'll reconnect. Maybe you have another questions.
sure. So this one is for Fernando. So Fernando, can you tell us a bit more about the cheese currency project you were mentioning?
Yes, well, so the idea is that within Inland we are creating let's say, a correspondency between production, circulation, and consumption. So we have like an inner circle of people living in the village and producing, a second circle of people who are like prosumers, we can say. No? They produce in some way, they consume from the village in another way. And then we want to organize a way in which these relations and the economical relations are mediated through our own currency, that would be the cheese coin. And the cheese coin is a cryptocurrency based on the equivalence of the amount of cheese we produce per year. So there are 400 kilos, more or less. And it has like an equivalence to a day of work, and also 1 kilo cheese, and also 1 ship adoption, and 35 euros. So you can play with these things and then add your own value. For example, if you are like a web designer, you can say, okay, this would be equivalent for 3 hours of web design, and you can just have a lot of cheese if we need to make a big website or something like that. So yes, we are working on this project with artist Hito Steyer, and I hope we manage to go to the next step that is like more on the programming level of the blockchain technology. But I have to say that I'm more in the cheese making side, so I won't be able to tell you much about the crypto programming part. But yeah, I'll let you know when it's finished and running, and then you can, yes, join.
So you're going to mix. You're going to mix technologies, high tech, as we say, and cheese currency. I mean, is that a mixture of both of it?
You're muted.
I was saying that yes, that's what the project is about. Yeah, like it's basically making sure that the wealth of the organization itself is just not divested or diverted into like different circles of accumulation of value, but is more related with the currency we decided to use. And if you allow me, I think I can just show you an image just because you asked, and now I'm excited, but very quick. Can you see it?
Yes, I see it. Is it a cheese currency?
That's the token. It's like, this is like the physical manifestation of the cheese coin, and this is like where we keep the storage, like the Fort Knox of the currency.
That's beautiful.
Is the cave where we keep the cheese. So yeah, so that's the, it's taking shape.
That's great.
Okay, so maybe we can go to the next question. So Barbara, since you're back, so I'll just repeat the first question I asked you. So could you tell me more about the effect of your art on your neighbors?
Yeah, sorry, I had a little technical glitch there. Because it's so rural here, we're literally 1 kilometer from the nearest village, but we've been here a long time, and I'm not Czech born, I'm a foreigner too. So the art that we bring in, I think, and the artists, it's really more about, can you hear me? Yeah. It's really more about the people and the exchange that happens than the actual art itself. I mean, I think like what Fernando had mentioned, that the role of art has changed, that it's not the object, it's not the thing anymore. It's the process that happens between people. And so it's almost like the creation of a work is an excuse for what happens between the people. So because we bring so many foreigners into our region here, which we're a very small country, which has a tendency or a history of being a little xenophobic, can we say, that has some problems with foreigners. And our hope is that after all these years, that the exchange between the people is really what creates that change. That it's the artists who are open-minded, usually, who are doing wacky things. And as artists, when we're doing things that are a little bit out of the ordinary or the norm for our villagers, then we have a freedom in that. And that freedom is what I think where new things can happen and new understanding between people. So I think it's a very abstract way to create change, but I think that's kind of surreptitiously what we're doing here, I hope. And yeah. And we, then we have the traditional students have come through and learn how to draw and how to see differently, that too. But I think on the larger scale, that it's really about a change that happens between how we experience the world we walk in.
As I know your place, and I know that you have been there quite a long time, I was wondering, could you talk to us about an example? I mean, about something you did with your neighbors. I mean, I know about the gender experiment. I mean, how you brought in the art mill women from the rural area to work with you, and it was kind of an exchange.
So yeah, that project was called Civic Women. And so we invited artists from all over the world who came in to work with local women. And so, for example, we have a local theater in the town that had closed down for several years because of lack of youth going to the theater anymore. It's an older population in the town. And we revitalized that space by having an exhibition. And we worked with local women with kolaches, which are traditional sweet breads here, and exchange recipes. And we photographed the kolaches. We got all the older women came in and told us how they made them, and we made them with them. And we celebrated that, and we brought that to the local Kino, to the theater, and had an exhibition there, and a theater performance happened with a wonderful Greek artist, Adonis. So we re-energized that space that had been long dormant through food, through kolaches. So that's just one example of some stuff that has happened. And then a lot of the artists who come here are pedagogues too, teaching art. So we've had exchanges with local school teachers, how they can integrate art into the local schools on a more vital level too. So that's another great thing that happened recently with this project. So those are a couple examples of how, besides them thinking that we're all a little crazy with all these artists here, but it works. It works.
Thank you. Jessica, do you have other questions from the...
So this one is for Fernando again. So what was the biggest obstacle in rural Spain to gather producers?
To get them, or for producers in general? I'm not sure if I understood the question.
I wouldn't want to answer for the person who asked the question.
Okay, but can you maybe read to me again?
Sure.
Could you read it again? Yeah.
Obstacle in rural Spain to gather producers?
To gather?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that it's something common to many other areas in rural Europe is that rural populations have decreased enormously during the last years of common agricultural policy. Even there was a recommendation that countries joining the European Union should reduce, in the case of Romania, for example, from 30–40% of active population being working on primary sector to 2%. So we have around a 2 or 3, 5% of the population producing food or working with the land in our countries. And it's really sad because it means that we have a 80% working on, I don't know, insurance, something not so maybe vital questions. And also it involves like a higher industrialization of food. So less people, more isolated, more dispersed, and it's harder to contact and to gather and to engage with. No? Also aged population and mostly what we call the masculinization of the countryside demographics. No? Mostly men left, and yeah, I mean with this situation, it's hard to let's say be yeah, agitating, no? And instigating an activation that's involves a long-term process of engagement. So with it's I would say that the best is to go and stay and be very humble, listening to the needs and the expression of interests of the local, not just go somewhere to the rural to say, okay, you might have this idea, we should do this. No, just take time to just receive and try to accompany what's expressed from the locality. And also, yes, I would say yes, start by that.
Okay, well, thank you very much for answering that. So next one is for Julia at the PAV. So could you elaborate the reason why the main focus of the PAV is the environment, although it is located in a former industrial area? And in other words, how does the PAV works with its territory and its population?
Well, thank you for the question. Let me answer it even if the person who asked the question says in other words. I think that maybe it's necessary to divide the question into different answers, because I think that the point is that well, as I said in the beginning, PAV is the result of the effort of a group of people extremely persuaded that environmental activism is one of the most urgent way, I would say, to make the world a better place. And please forgive me the level of abstraction of this expression, but it is what it is in this sense. It's like it's a personal struggle of a really motivated group of people. So environmental activism was the main reason from the beginning, even before the possibility of having a proper location for the project, because in the presentation I said that PAV project started in the mid-2000s, and PAV construction site opened in 2006. So before to find a place, actually PAV was some kind of nomad projects all around the city of Turin, inhabiting many places in the city of Turin. And then came the former industrial place. So environmentalism came before the former industrial place. But in a way, I will say that we can say that PAV main focus is environmentalism, not although it's an former industrial place, but I would say that I mean it perfectly fits the narrative of the place, because in a way it's really difficult to try to synthesize such a use process as it is a part of a city changing completely its destination, okay, especially in such a delicate moment of Western history, as it were, the end of the 80s and the beginning of the 90s, the period in which the factory that was where PAV is at the moment ceased its activities. So we are talking about a turning point for the whole world, and it was a turning point, of course, also for our area. So the population now lives in that area is not the same that used to live there before. And coming to the second part of your question, but maintaining a link with the first, the point is that art and environmentalism, I think that in a way came, even if it's not consequential, maybe it's a bit randomic, but I think that we can find the reasons, we can find that consequential factor. I think that this kind of experiment of art and environmental practices can suggest ways to not leave empty spaces that have been left empty from the process of decadence of our former economic model based on industrial production. Not that nowadays the situation is better, of course. We're living a different problem, okay? But in a way, yeah, I think that both on the physical perspective and also in the conceptual perspective, Pav's environmentalist effort and attitude, in a way, comes to give a new sense to an empty place. Okay, a place that is empty because of economics, because of the gradual empowerment of the area. So comes the question, how do you relate with the population? Oh my God, the answer is the same of Fernando. It's a long process. And even if I can just imagine how it is to work with like masculinized scenario of the rural areas in Spain, which I imagine is kind of similar to the Italian ones. Also, suburban metropolitan area can be areas that are quite super rich of stimuli, but also problematic at the same time. So it's all an issue of community building day after day. And food can be a great, coming to the main theme of the country, food, especially food that we produce and we self-produce, you know, in a way, because as I said, in the park we have gardens, and you know, and food can be a real strong means of community building. Like, I don't want to go too much into, you know, history of art, but you know, there's a question in the question and answer box that I don't want to anticipate, but that goes to the, you know, possibility of give new sense to the word art and our conception of art. But like, think about Gordon Matta Clark work, you know, food. It was a proper restaurant. It was all a project about community building, of course, in an amazing scenario. But I think that in a way, art was always a means of community building. So it's what we are doing now. I hope it was clear. You know?
Well, I have attended different exhibitions at the PAV with food and communities from local places around. So I know very well the kind of go-between you do between the territory and the place and the food and sustainable approaches of food growing. So, I mean, you have this kind of weaving through time and space, which is very interesting. And Torino, even if it's an urban community, because we need to interest urban community to food growing. I think it is much still as important than in rural areas, because there are many youngsters who feel very disconnected from nature. It's very important to teach them about it. Perhaps, Jessica, you have other questions?
Sure. So this one is for Fernando. You mentioned that you operate simultaneously in different locations with different contexts. So rural, urban, remote, connected, etc. So did you plan this in 2010 when you started inland, or did the need for these different configurations grow over time? And which in between worlds, worlds within worlds, are you able to cultivate through the network you're growing?
Thank you for the question. I think that inland took this multi-locality or interlocal nature since the very beginning, and maybe also based on the fact of my biographic reality of living and being from a remote rural location in the mountains, and also studying and living in Madrid on the city, and then finding the need to connect both. Like I don't consider rural to be a place for retreat and just let's say be far from the toxicity of the city, but actually, well, I very much think that, but nevertheless, I think that it's important to stay as well connected to the city, because at the same time, it's not about creating spaces of isolation, but actually bridging both. No, there is no real dichotomy between the city and the countryside. It's more all of a urban continuum, if you like, also in cultural terms. And the other space in Mallorca, I didn't mention much, but it came later, and it's related with the idea of also the being present in the different ecosystemic realities of the place where we are more connected in terms of food production. So the Mediterranean ecosystem there in Mallorca allows us to produce, for example, olive oil and oranges, and then in the mountains we produce more of the cheese and the meat. And then Madrid is, of course, big cities have the potential of connecting with groups of support. And for example, when we run the Shepherd School, most of the students are coming from city backgrounds. So it's interesting. As well, very often the products will go there. So yeah, we are producing in all these three places and transforming at the food level, and also producing, let's say, culturally or art projects in these locations. And I think it's also important because the people who are joining inland don't feel to be just maybe forever, you know, in the village or something. It's about the transhuman, no, transient reality of being in between places for certain operations. So I think the flow and the circulation amongst the places is also important to avoid in this specific moment in which we are like not used to be, let's say, stationary, to have the possibility of reconfiguration, no, of the specific social groups we are promoting and creating in these locations. I don't know if it made sense, but there you go, as a possible answer.
Yes, thank you for your answer. So we still have a few questions. So this one is for Julia again. So in the urban area where the park is located, is this a community where there is a limited access to fresh production? So do you want me to reformulate? Or
can I already answer, because the question was a little bit long? Sorry.
Yeah, sure. The person is asking is if the place where the PAV is implemented, is there limited access to fresh food production? Is it a food deserts? Because the person says that they have those communities in the USA.
Yeah, I was reading the question. And even before reading the part about food deserts, when the question started, I was like, is he or she, sorry, speaking about food deserts? Because I know the phenomenon, of course, because I read about it. And I read about the fact that it's a thing in the US. Well, in our zone is not a problem. And I wouldn't, well, I'm not sure that I can speak about, all of Europe, because of course my experience is limited, and so please keep it with a grain of salt. It's just my personal perception. My personal perception is that in Europe, for sure in Italy, okay, we don't have a phenomenon like food desert. Of course, the access to large-scale distribution is easier and more economically convenient than dealing directly with farmers and stuff. But even in a urban context like Turin, I should say that it's quite easy to buy products directly from the producers. People is quite well organized with groups of in Italy we call them gruppi di acquisto solidale, a group of like solidal buying. I guess we can translate it as that. It is like basically people coming together to buy stuff directly from the producer that's in the urban area. And I should say that in my perception, I always lived in the north of Italy, but in my perception is that in Italy there's a certain sensibility to this kind of issues, and it's not that bad. Probably the geographical configuration of our country facilitates it, but in a way, no, I don't think that we have problems like food desert. Of course, the more we enhance, as also Fernando and Barbara and Natalie were saying before, the more we enhance the attitude and the possibility to involve people living in the urban context, in the culture of the rural world, the better it is. But I will say that we are not in that kind of critical situation. I'm always very sorry when I read about food deserts. It's really bad.
We have a few minutes left because we're supposed to finish around 6:30 p.m. So are there any other questions, quick answers?
There's a few questions, but maybe I should prioritize. There's two questions that kind of address all of you, all the intervenants. So first one is, so also since this culture-led urban regeneration processes evidently trade on values of artistic authenticity to pursue the aims of local institutions and the related commercial interests, how do you think that such a avant-garde form of art can maintain a truly militant profile? Do you want me to repeat the question, or is it okay?
It's very clear to me. I don't know what about Fernando and Barbara. It's clear and difficult, very difficult.
Go for it, go for it.
I don't know, I have the impression that I already spoke too much, which is quite common. I don't know, maybe Barbara wants to answer, since I think that she's the person that had like less possibility to express herself. Sorry, I'm super talkative.
No, I can go, yes. I think by I think by the very definition of what we're all trying to do out in these rural districts, that it can never have the chance to be subsumed into what this questioner is trying to worry about. I think that the challenges are so great that I think, I don't know if I'd use the word militant, but I think radical perhaps, that we will continue to be that way just by the definition of what it is we're doing. That these you know, we had a long discussion with some neighbors here today about granting, and I'm sure for all of the organizations to be getting grants from our local ministries, from state or federal or even European, how difficult that is to fund these kinds of projects, and coming up with cheese exchange and all kinds of alternatives to just keep our doors open and to keep things running, I think is always going to keep us also deinstitutionalized, if I can say that, that because we're creative people and creative organizations, that we're by our definition, we're going to stay on the outside, I feel, literally also. So I don't worry about if I'm understanding the question correctly, but I think it's always going to be the good struggle, if I can put it that way.
I think it's a very pertinent question and very important, and I guess the person asking it is thinking on Capello, no, the Spirit of Capitalism, the book that is looking on how creative economy not really was actually not really transformative, but actually a boost into the way of understanding post-Fordist economies, no, and hyperflexibility and so on. So I don't think it's about artistic authenticity. What I mean is, how to say, also I'm not sure about avant-garde anymore. I think it's about recovering some form of collective impulse to relate to ways to cope with our needs, like in an autonomous way or directly, you know, with the means we have at hand in that collective space we could create. So that involves many more things that having like an avant-gardist art practice because sometimes avant-garde were about formal renovation and formal, rupture with tradition and so on. But I think that capitalism has shown us that now actually it's perfectly fine with this eternal pluralistic renovation of genres, no? This kind of favor of the new, and is no longer any radical gesture on that. No? So I think that the radical gesture is actually to question, as I was saying at the beginning, the ecology of art system, no? Like the idea of individual author pursuing a career, as art and as a specialized task divided, separated from life. I think it's time to start to question all that and to think more on putting us our creative faculties, no, in the realm of the everyday, of the proximity, of the exchanges, and also the big challenge is as artists that we are, like, let's say, hyper specialized sophisticated cultural workers and imaginary makers, how we go back to the reality of the average person on earth, no? Because at some point it has, through avant-garde, gone very far and very high in the ivory tower, but not really maybe sometimes shared as something as valuable as it is, I don't know, a celebrity video clip, or as a football match, or as a church service and religion was before. And we need to reach that form of, let's say, a common space and moving space. So yeah, it's on us artists to find ways to be, maybe somehow loyal, no, to this idea of something that has a value in aesthetical, conceptual level, but also is connecting, no, with the context surrounding us. Not easy, but I guess it's possible. I think it's possible. I want to believe.
Thank you very much. That was, I felt like, Jessica, do you feel like there are any other important question? Otherwise, I mean, we might close this webinar.
I think we can, there are still questions, but I would say we can close it since it's already 6:35, past 6:30. So yes, I think we're done here.
Okay, thank you everyone. I mean, this was a very interesting first webinar because there will be more of it, and I hope our book will delve in more depth onto these questions, because it's very important to see what kind. I don't like the word of avant-garde because it's so modern. I mean, we see where it leads, but what kind of renewal this kind of practices can lead to, I mean, in terms of territory, but also in terms of way of life. I mean, it is very important that we are able to invent new waves of life at the as much as the ecological emergency is right before us. So thank you, everyone. And I hope that we'll have, next time we'll meet person to person, and we'll have time to go to your place, to your place, to your place, to all places. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a nice weekend.
Have a nice
You
weekend.
too.
Ciao.